Welcome to the Psychology of Gambling, the podcast from Mind Over Odds, where we believe if you control your emotions, you control your outcomes.
Yeah.
Today, we are diving into a deep dive on, a really fascinating topic.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's that relatable, everyday struggle where you see someone who is otherwise brilliant just completely lose their shirt on a bad bet.
Right, and you just think, how on earth did that happen? Like, you're so smart in every other area of your life.
Exactly.
So I want you to picture something. Imagine you're sitting in a classroom at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business.
Okay, so we're talking about a room full of very smart people.
Oh, completely. It's a room full of highly rational graduate students. These are the future titans of finance.
Right.
And the professor pulls out a crisp $20 bill and announces this simple auction. He says, you can bid on the bill, but there is one really weird rule.
Okay, what's the rule?
The highest bidder gets the $20, obviously, but the second highest bidder still has to pay whatever they bid, and they get absolutely nothing.
Wow. I mean, at first that sounds like a fun game. Like the bidding probably starts at $1, $2. Somebody thinks they're going to get $20 for really cheap.
Yeah, exactly. It starts off light. But then the bidding hits $19, and the trap it snaps shut.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. Because the person who bid $18 realizes that if they stop right now, they have to pay $18 and get nothing in return. So they bid $20 just to break even.
Which means the person who was at $19 is now facing a guaranteed $19 loss.
Yes. So what do? They bid $21.
Yeah.
Because in their head, losing $1 is better than losing 19.
That is just wild.
And suddenly, these highly educated, incredibly analytical people are caught in this vicious war of loss aversion. And it ends with a young man paying $28 for a $20 bill.
Which is, I mean, the absolute definition of irrational behavior. And it's playing out in a room full of people whose entire careers are built on calculating risk and reward.
Right. So our mission in this deep dive is to figure out the behavioral mechanics of why that happens. Why smart people still lose everything when gambling.
Because it really is a paradox, isn't it? We assume that raw intelligence is this, like, total immunity shield. But we're pulling from population data, clinical psychology, and even casino design research today to show that it's actually not.
It's really not. Gambling doesn't just test your intellect. It tests your emotional regulation.
Yeah. And when it comes to trying to outsmart a system that is literally designed around pure chance, your own brain's processing power often becomes your absolute worst enemy.
So let's talk about that disconnect.
Yeah.
Because we have this image of successful people, doctors, lawyers, business owners.
Right, the high IQ crowd.
Yeah. You would think someone with a high IQ would spot a mathematically terrible bet from a mile away. But the data actually points to a high IQ functioning as a massive vulnerability.
It really does. There's actually a concept from a cognitive scientist named Keith Stanovich. He coined this term called dysrationalia.
Dysrationalia. I love that word. It just sounds exactly like what it is.
It totally does. And it basically describes this proven, scientifically measurable mismatch between high general intelligence and rational decision-making.
Because we all just assume that if you're good at abstract reasoning, like if you crushed your SATs or you can solve complex engineering problems, you just automatically make logical life choices.
Right. But Stanovich found that the correlation between fluid intelligence and rational behavior is actually shockingly low. They are basically two completely separate mental muscles.
Wow. So you can have a massive brain and still make terribly irrational choices.
Exactly. And it leads to what psychologists call the bias blind spot.
Oh, I see this all the time.
Yeah, highly educated people are just so used to outperforming others on cognitive tasks at work, they unconsciously expect to outperform everyone in every scenario.
It's an arrogance thing.
Right. It creates this massive blind spot where they become totally oblivious to the holes in their own logic just because they rarely have to question their own competence.
There are so many historical examples of this, like Arthur Conan Doyle, the guy who created Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yeah, the ultimate symbol of pure logic.
Exactly. But in his later years, he was repeatedly duped by these fraudulent mediums. He even publicly defended the existence of fairies.
Wait, really? Fairies?
Yes, fairies. Or think about Paul Frampton, this brilliant, world-renowned physicist who worked on dark matter. He got completely taken in by a painfully obvious online romance scam and ended up in a foreign prison.
That is just crazy. How does a brain that powerful miss something that obvious?
Well, because raw processing power doesn't protect you from deception if your emotional needs are steering the ship. Like Conan Doyle was grieving the death of his son.
Oh, man.
Yeah. He had this profound emotional need to believe in the afterlife. So instead of his intellect acting as a shield, his genius-level mind was actually used to construct these incredibly elaborate, bulletproof-sounding defenses for a delusion.
He used his smarts to prove why the fake mediums were real?
Exactly. And Frampton's ego demanded that he was right about his online romance. So he used his advanced pattern recognition skills to just, you know, rationalize away all the red flags that an average person would have spotted immediately.
That makes so much sense. It really aligns with this analogy I love. Having a high IQ is like having a car with a massive, powerful engine.
All right.
It can go incredibly fast. But if you don't have the steering wheel of rationality, that massive engine just gets you to the wrong destination much faster than everyone else.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But wait, let me ask you this, because I know people are thinking this. Shouldn't a smart person just learn from the mistake?
You would think so, right?
Like if you touch a hot stove, you don't touch it again. If a highly analytical person loses a bunch of money at a casino, shouldn't their brain just step in, analyze the terrible math, and say, hey, let's walk away?
Well, that is exactly where intelligence turns into a weapon against yourself. It comes down to this mechanism called post-decision storytelling.
Okay, what is that? Like making up an excuse.
Basically, yeah. The initial bad bet is usually driven by emotion. You know, maybe the person is stressed or they're bored or they just want a thrill. But the intelligence arrives after the fact to rationalize it.
Oh, I see.
A less analytical person might look at their empty wallet and just accept, well, I lost, this is a bad idea. But a highly intelligent person uses that formidable brain power to build a really complex, sophisticated thesis to explain away the failure.
Yeah, they start throwing around jargon. They talk about bad variance, or they say their sample size was too small,
Exact.
or they calculate that statistically they are, quote unquote, due for a positive regression to the mean.
Right, they build this mathematical fortress around their bad decision, which just entrenches the behavior even deeper. They convince themselves that they don't need to quit, they just need to refine their algorithm.
Wow. So if their brains are already that good at rationalizing failure, what happens when they step into an environment that is literally designed to encourage that exact trait?
Yeah, because casinos are not an accident.
No, not at all. So let's talk about the illusion of control. There was this landmark study back in 1975 by Ellen Langer.
Oh, the lottery ticket study.
Yes, she ran this experiment where participants were either handed a random lottery ticket or they were allowed to choose their own numbers. And mathematically, the odds of the tickets winning were completely identical.
Sure.
But when she offered to buy the tickets back later, the people who had chosen their own numbers demanded a significantly higher price for them.
Just because they picked the numbers.
Exactly. The simple act of touching the ticket and picking the numbers fundamentally altered their perception of its value. They confused choice with actual influence over the outcome.
And if you apply that illusion of control to a highly intelligent person, it gets dangerous fast.
Oh, yeah.
Because smart people naturally look for patterns. It's the trait that made them successful in their careers. So when they walk into a casino or they open a betting app and they happen to win early on, they don't think it's dumb luck.
Right, their ego takes over.
Yeah. Their ego interprets that random variance as validation of their intellect. They think to themselves, oh, I've spotted the pattern. I have an edge.
Which is just a treadmill disguised as a road.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how an analytical mind views the world effort compounds. If you study law for 10 years, you become a great attorney. If you practice the piano, you get genuinely better. You are conditioned to believe
Yeah.
that hard work and intense focus equals mastery.
But on a treadmill, you can run as hard as you want and you aren't actually covering any ground. The effort is just an illusion.
Exactly.
The casino controls the speed of the belt. The harder you work at a game of pure chance, the faster you just exhaust your mental and financial resources.
But let me push back on that for a second, because what about games that actually do involve skill? Like, if I'm playing poker against my buddies in a garage, I can use my brain, right? I can read body language. I can calculate pot odds. I can actually outplay them.
Yeah, in a vacuum or in that garage, skill does matter. But the moment you step into a commercial casino or log onto an online poker site, you are dealing with the rake.
Ah, the rake, the fee the house takes.
Right. The house takes a cut out of every single pot no matter who wins the hand. And that mathematical reality fundamentally changes everything.
Because you're paying a tax.
Exactly. Even if you are genuinely a little better than the average player at your table, the rake means the house is constantly, slowly siphoning away your money. To actually turn a profit, you don't just have to beat the other players, you have to beat them by a huge margin just to overcome that permanent tax.
And most people just aren't that good.
No, they aren't. And the illusion of control creates this profound overconfidence. If you ask a room full of poker players to point out the bad players at the table, nobody's going to raise their own hand.
Everyone thinks they're the shark.
Everyone. They all falsely believe they're in that highly skilled minority.
So eventually, the math proves the system is failing. The rake eats the poker stack, the slot machines drain the wallet. Why doesn't the successful person just stop? Why don't they just look at their bank account, admit it failed, and ask for help?
That comes down to the ego of competence.
The ego of competence.
Yeah. Successful people, executives, surgeons, high-level analysts, they are used to solving their own problems in private. Their whole life narrative is built on self-reliance. They have this deep belief that says, I am smart enough to fix this.
Wow. And the shame of admitting otherwise has to be just overwhelming. If your entire identity is built on being the smartest person in the room, the one who fixes everything, admitting that you are being outsmarted by a flashing machine has to be devastating.
It is, and that shame creates a terrible cycle of secrecy. Instead of reaching out for help, they try to outthink the problem in total isolation. They tell themselves, if I just tweak my betting system, I can win it all back and nobody will ever know.
And the scary part is, because they are successful, they actually have the money to hide it for a long time. Like, if someone with a lower income develops a gambling problem, they hit a financial wall pretty quickly. It forces the issue out into the open. But a high earner can cover those early losses. They compartmentalize.
They keep up appearances.
Right. They maintain this perfect facade at work and at home while they are secretly hemorrhaging cash on the side.
Which is terrifying, because the danger isn't that smart people fail faster, it's that their resources and their ego allow them to conceal the failure for so much longer.
Yeah, turning a small problem into a total catastrophe before their spouse even notices.
And it's not just their psychology working against them. The environment itself is weaponized.
For casinos.
The physical and digital architecture of gambling is literally weaponized behavioral science. Look at a casino floor. It's a maze. You have to walk past hundreds of flashing temptations just to find the bathroom.
And there are no clocks.
No clocks, no windows. So you have no environmental cues about time passing. Even the chairs are a trap.
Wait, the chair.
Yeah. Casino seating is ergonomically designed to be comfortable enough to prevent a sore back or stiff legs, which would normally tell your brain it's time to go home, but they keep you just upright enough to stay alert.
Oh, that is so sneaky.
And the real hijacking happens biologically with your dopamine system. There is this famous neurocognitive experiment with monkeys that shows this perfectly.
Oh, the juice experiment.
Yes. Researchers monitored monkeys' dopamine levels, which is the brain's reward chemical. They trained them to pull a lever to get a squirt of sweet juice. And they found that the massive dopamine spike didn't happen when the monkey drank the juice.
It happened before.
Exactly. It peaked the moment they pulled the lever. Anticipation is the actual reward, and that is exactly what gambling hooks into. You aren't addicted to the money itself. You get addicted to the physiological rush of the uncertainty.
And they turbocharge that rush using unpredictable rewards, right?
Yeah.
Like a variable ratio reinforcement.
Right.
Because if a slot machine paid out every single time, you'd get bored. If it never paid out, you'd quit. By making it completely unpredictable, the brain becomes obsessed with solving a puzzle that just doesn't have a solution.
And they use near misses, too.
Oh, those are the worst.
A modern slot machine is basically a computer program designed to frequently show you two matching symbols and a third that just barely misses the line. And neurologically, your brain processes that visual near miss with a dopamine spike almost as powerful as an actual jackpot.
It gives you that agonizing feeling of, oh, I almost had it. I just need one more pull.
Exactly.
You know, knowing how powerful that neurochemistry is, I want to pause here for a moment. If you or someone you know struggles with compulsive or problem gambling, free help is available 24 hours a day by calling 1-800-GAMBLER. You are fighting billions of dollars of optimized neuroscience, and you do not have to fight it alone.
That's right. And it's so important to recognize that this neuroscience isn't just in Vegas anymore. It's in your pocket.
The betting apps.
Online betting apps use the exact same biological triggers. You see them offer free spins or they match your deposit up to $500.
Which feels like a gift.
But it's not. In the industry, those are explicitly called reactivation strategies. They give you free money to build a habit loop. Once your brain is hooked and the free money is gone, you'll start depositing your own money just to chase that feeling.
So we've talked about how intelligence and ego form this trap. But does that mean Lower intelligence makes you immune. What does the broader demographic data say?
Well, there was a massive population survey from Cambridge University that looked at this, and they found that the odds of someone developing problem gambling actually doubled with each standard deviation drop in their estimated verbal IQ.
Wait, so if lower IQ correlates with a higher rate of problem gambling, how does that fit with what we just said about intelligence being a vulnerability?
It's all about synthesizing the two ideas. Lower IQ might correlate with a general vulnerability to the lure of a quick payout across the wider population.
Okay, that makes sense.
But a high IQ creates a completely different, highly specialized pathology. It creates a high-functioning trap where the person uses their complex rationalizations and their deep pockets to sustain and hide the addiction.
So it's just a different flavor of the same trap.
Exactly. And we also have to look at gender. Men are particularly vulnerable here. Biologically, men generally have a higher dopaminergic response to risk, and higher testosterone is strongly correlated with risk-taking.
Plus, culturally, betting is so tied to bravado for guys. Taking massive financial risks is seen as proving you're the smartest, boldest guy in the room.
Yeah. And that brings us to this fascinating insight from professional investor Dan McMurtry. People constantly confuse gambling with high-level investing.
Oh, completely. They think it's the exact same thing.
But true professionals look at risk completely differently. McMurtry uses the Monty Hall problem as a mental model.
The game show's statistics puzzle.
Right. You pick one of three doors, the host reveals a goat behind a door you didn't pick, and asks if you want to switch.
And the mathematically correct move is always to switch.
Yes, because the host just gave you new information about the constraints of the game. Switching takes downside risk off the table, and that is what a professional investor does. They aren't taking blind leaps of faith based on a gut feeling. They look for ways to remove downside risk.
They only want bets where they have a provable edge.
Exactly. But gambling is the exact opposite. The casino pushes players into sucker bets, like parlays on sports apps.
Oh, parlays are brutal.
You have to get 4, 5, or 6 different predictions right just to get a single payout. The house holds all the edge, and the gambler is voluntarily maximizing their downside risk just for the illusion of a massive payoff.
So how do we escape this? If you are a highly analytical person and your brain, your biology, and your phone are all wired to keep you playing, how do you break the cycle?
Well, the first step is admitting that you can't just logic your way out of a craving.
You really can't.
When the dopamine is surging, your prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, is completely bypassed. In that moment, staring at a flashing app, your raw IQ points are functionally zero.
Which is why clinical frameworks say you have to move from a prediction model to a protection model.
Exactly. A prediction model is trying to outthink the casino, trying to build a better algorithm or find a flaw in the poker odds.
Relying on your intellect.
Right. But a protection model recognizes that your intellect will fail you. So you build structural walls before the urges even arrive. You don't wait for willpower. You establish deposit barriers at your bank. You install blocking software on your devices.
And most importantly, you have to dismantle that ego. You have to shatter the secrecy. You have to look a trusted person in the eye, a spouse, a friend, a therapist, and admit that you cannot outsmart this on your own.
That is why therapies like CBT and 12-step groups like Gamblers Anonymous are the gold standard. They bypass raw willpower, they teach emotional regulation, and they force accountability. That shared vulnerability destroys the shame that the intelligence trap relies on.
Absolutely. So to wrap this up for you, the listener, being brilliant does not protect you from making a terrible bet. In fact, your massive mental engine can drive you off a financial cliff much faster if you use it to rationalize bad behavior.
The casino is a weaponized environment. And if your ego convinces you that you're too smart to fall for it, you will just use your resources to hide your losses until they ruin you.
Which brings us to a final thought experiment. Imagine you dedicate your brilliant mind to sports betting. You spend 1,000 hours in a year stressing over lines, analyzing odds, losing sleep.
And against all odds, you actually win. Let's say you net $10,000 for the year.
10 grand for 1,000 hours of relentless mental stress. That works out to $10 an hour.
Less than minimum wage.
For your brain's absolute highest processing power.
So ask yourself, what if that incredible drive and that intense focus were pointed at a genuine skill, something real, something where your effort actually compounds into mastery instead of just enriching a casino?
If you found this conversation helpful today, please follow the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a 5-star review. It helps more people in our community find these resources. You can also visit the Mind Over Odds YouTube channel for more psychology-based insights on gambling behavior. We'll talk to you next time. Control your emotions. Control your outcomes.